My name is Rachel Hartley. I'm 41 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my sister slapped me across the face hard enough to leave a handprint on my cheek, and she did it in front of 28 of our family members. Not one of them moved. Not one of them said a single word. And when my mom turned around and looked me dead in the eyes, she didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't grab my sister by the arm. She pointed at me and said, "You apologize to your sister right now, or you get your things and you leave my house." My dad didn't say anything. He just stood up from his armchair, walked to the front door like he was taking out the trash, and held it wide open. The November cold poured into that living room like it had been waiting outside all night. I picked up my coat. I picked up my keys. And I walked out. No tears. No dramatic speech. Nothing. But here's the part nobody saw coming. Not them, not me, not anyone. By the time the sun came up the next morning, everything about our family was about to change. And I mean everything. If you're watching this right now, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I need to know you're out there. Now let me take you back to the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. The day I pulled into my parents' driveway for the very last time. The drive from Charlotte, North Carolina down to Claiborne, South Carolina usually takes about 3.5 hours if you catch I-77 at the right time. I left my apartment at noon with a trunk full of food I ordered from a catering company near my office. A full Thanksgiving spread, turkey, glazed ham, all the sides, 2 pies, and a peach cobbler. I had been paying for Thanksgiving dinner every single year for the past 7 years. Nobody asked me to stop. Nobody ever said thank you either. I pulled into my parents' driveway around 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, a day early this year because Mom called and said they needed help setting up. Amber's car was already in the driveway. Of course it was. When I walked through the side door into the kitchen, Amber was standing at the counter arranging a charcuterie board like she was filming a cooking show. Mom was right behind her, fussing with the centerpiece on the table. "Oh, there she is," Mom said, barely glancing up. "Put the food on the counter over there." No hug. "No, how was the drive, honey?" "Just instructions." Amber waved a cracker in my direction. "You're late." I wasn't late. I said 4 o'clock and it was 4:12. But I set the first tray down and kept my mouth shut. From the living room, I could hear Mom talking to Aunt Margie. Amber drove down Monday night. She's been here since yesterday helping me get everything ready. She's just so good about that. I looked around that kitchen. The brand new granite countertops I put the deposit on last spring. The recessed lighting I hired the electrician for. The French door refrigerator I picked out and paid for because Mom's old one had been making a noise for 2 years and nobody did anything about it. Not one person in that house had ever said, "Rachel paid for that." It was always, "We finally got the kitchen updated." Like it was a group effort. Like there was some family fund I didn't know about. I was setting down the last tray when I noticed something on the counter near the windowsill. A white envelope from First Piedmont Lending, the company that held my parents' second mortgage. The flap was slightly lifted, like someone had peeled it open and pressed it back down. Sloppy job. "Don't touch that." Amber's voice hit me from behind. "That's Mom and Dad's mail." I set it back down. But I didn't forget about it. I should tell you about Grandma Ruth. She raised me more than my parents ever did, and that is not an exaggeration or a jab, it's just the truth. When I was 7 years old, Dad picked up overtime at the plant and Mom started cleaning houses on the weekends. Amber was barely 3, still in diapers. So I went to Grandma Ruth's house every single morning before school and stayed until dark most evenings. She taught me how to keep a budget, how to read a contract, how to tell the difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. When I was 23, I sat next to her hospital bed and held her hand while the monitors beeped slow and steady. She looked at me with those clear gray eyes, sharp even at the end, and said, "Hold this family together, Ratch. They don't know how without you." I promised her I would. That promise cost me more than she ever knew. Over the next 17 years, I kept that promise the only way I knew how, with money. I co-signed the second mortgage on my parents' house when the first wasn't enough to cover the repairs the place needed. $155,000. My name on the deed. I funded Amber's boutique floral and event design studio to the tune of $52,000 for the initial deposit and setup costs. I sent $1,600 every single month to cover Mom's medical bills and Dad's supplemental insurance. 9 years straight. You do the math, it's closing in on $450,000 total. And I never asked for a receipt, never asked for a thank you note, never asked for anything. I did it because Grandma Ruth asked me to. I thought money was the glue holding everything together. What I didn't know, what I was starting to figure out that Tuesday evening, was that Amber had been telling my parents a different story. She'd been telling them the financial help came from family savings and resources we put together. She had repackaged my money as a collective effort and put herself in the center of it. And my parents never questioned it. Because questioning it would mean having to admit the daughter who moved away, the one they called too independent, had been keeping their house and their lives afloat for nearly a decade. It's easier to believe the lie when the truth is that uncomfortable. I slept on the pull-out couch in the den that Tuesday night, staring at the ceiling, running through the mental math I always do after I visit. And that envelope from First Piedmont Lending kept circling back around in my mind. Amber didn't want me to touch it. Amber never cares about things that don't matter to her. That should have told me everything. Thanksgiving morning. I was up before 5. Old habit. Grandma Ruth used to say that the person who starts the coffee owns the day. Kitchen was still dark. I filled the coffee maker, pressed brew, and leaned against the counter while it ran. That's when I saw the envelope again. But this time it had been fully opened. And it wasn't on the counter anymore. It was in the recycling bin under a cardboard box, face down. Now I know I probably shouldn't have looked. But I did. I reached in and tilted it just enough to see the header on the document inside. Deed transfer notification. My whole body went cold, and it had nothing to do with the November air. I grabbed my phone. Not to be sneaky, just reflex, the same reflex you have when you're in a fender bender and you start taking pictures before your brain has even caught up to what's happening. I snapped one photo of that header. Just the header. Then I shoved the envelope back under the cardboard and stepped away from the recycling bin. Footsteps on the stairs. I grabbed a potato peeler from the drawer, pulled a 10-pound bag of russets from under the counter, and when Mom walked in wearing her bathrobe and yesterday's hair, I was standing at the sink peeling potatoes like I'd been there all morning. "You're up early," she said. "Yep." She poured coffee from the pot I made and sat down with the newspaper. Didn't say thank you. Didn't ask how I slept. I peeled potatoes and thought about that document. Deed transfer. Could be a routine refinance update. Could be an administrative adjustment. Could be nothing. But Amber had gone out of her way to get that envelope out of sight, and Amber doesn't spend energy on nothing. Here's what I knew about that mortgage. My name was on it. My name was on the deed as co-signer when we set up the second mortgage 9 years ago. If my name had been removed from that deed without my knowledge, if someone had filed a transfer without my consent, that wasn't just a family problem. That was fraud. And if someone had used the equity I built up with 9 years of payments to open a new line of credit, my professional reputation, my financial future, all of it would be on the line. But it was Thanksgiving. The house was starting to wake up. Car doors were slamming in the driveway. Aunt Margie's voice carried from the front porch. I could hear my dad's recliner squeak as he settled in for the pregame show. One more day, I told myself. Grandma Ruth asked me to hold this family together. One more day. "Rachel, get the good china from the dining room hutch," Mom called. "And make sure Amber's seat is next to your father." Course it is. By 2 in the afternoon, there were 28 people in that house. Folding chairs dragged in from the garage, the piano bench pressed into service, coats piled 3 deep on the hall tree. Place smelled like roasted turkey and apple cider and my grandmother's old tablecloth that Mom only brought out for the holidays. Dad sat at the head of the table. He nodded when I walked past. That was it. A single nod. I had driven 3.5 hours for that nod. Mom pulled Amber around the room like she was introducing a celebrity. You all know my Amber. She runs her own event design business now. Her bookings are through the roof. Amber smiled and tossed her hair and talked about a wedding she'd decorated down in Greenville. She made it sound like the business was thriving. What I knew, because I had seen the bank statements when I was helping with a loan application, was that the studio had lost money 4 months in a row. Before I could answer a question from one of my cousins about what I did for work, Mom stepped in. Oh, Rachel works up in Charlotte. Some corporate thing. I am the Senior Director of Operations for a regional infrastructure development company. I oversee 8-figure project budgets. I manage teams across 3 states. But sure, Mom. Some corporate thing. In the corner of the living room, sitting quiet in the wing chair with a glass of sweet tea, was Aunt Diane. She's Dad's older sister, 64, silver bob, the kind of woman who notices everything and says very little. She caught my eye across the room and shook her head just barely. Half an inch of movement. But I saw it. She saw me. Later, near the hallway bathroom, Amber grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, her voice a hard whisper. Don't bring up the studio loan at dinner. I told Mom it's paid off. I stared at her. It's not paid off. Just smile and stay out of my way tonight. That's literally all you have to do. She walked away. I stood in that hallway alone for a moment, listening to the sounds of 28 people laughing and talking in the next room, and I thought about that envelope in the recycling bin. Now, here's something I need to tell you. Before all of this started back in Charlotte, I had done something almost by instinct. The morning I left for Claiborne, I had emailed Stephen Park. Stephen is a real estate attorney I've worked with for years on commercial deals. Sharp, careful, the kind of guy who puts a period at the end of his text messages. I'd sent him the photo of the deed transfer header with a 2-sentence message. This is my parents' property. I'm co-signer on the second mortgage. Can you look into this? And then I'd put my phone down and driven south. I didn't check that email until Thanksgiving evening, right before dinner. There was also someone else I need to tell you about. My colleague Jordan Hayes. Jordan works in contracts at my firm and has been a friend for 3 years. She texted me around noon on Thanksgiving. You okay? You've seemed off all week. I didn't reply right then. But knowing she noticed, knowing someone out there was paying attention, mattered more than I can tell you. I excused myself before the family photo and locked myself in the hallway bathroom. Sat on the edge of the tub. Pulled up my email. 2 messages from Stephen. The first, time-stamped 2:38 p.m. Got your message about the property. Something here doesn't look right. Don't do anything until we talk. Call me Friday. The second, sent 11 minutes later. Actually, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Don't engage. Call me Friday morning first thing. Stephen Park does not send 2 follow-up messages. In 12 years of working together, I have never gotten a follow-up from him unless the ground was moving. My hands were steady when I put my phone back in my pocket, but my chest wasn't. I splashed water on my face and walked back toward the living room. And that is when I nearly ran into Kyle. Kyle is Amber's husband. He was standing alone in the hallway, back against the wall, arms crossed, tie loosened, looking like a man who had been losing an argument with himself all day. Rachel. His voice was low. I need you to know I told her not to do it. I stopped. Do what? He opened his mouth. Closed it. From the living room, Amber's laugh cut through the noise like a fire alarm. Kyle. Come here. Sharp. Immediate. He flinched, an actual flinch, then looked at me straight and said, "Check your physical mail when you get home. Not email. Your actual mailbox." He pushed off the wall. "I'm sorry," he said, and then he was gone around the corner. I stood in that hallway with the bathroom faucet dripping behind me and a child's sneakers squeaking on the hardwood somewhere nearby. 2 warnings now. One from my attorney. One from my brother-in-law. Neither one willing to give me the whole picture. Both scared. That told me everything about how serious this was. Mom wanted the family photo by the fireplace. She always does. Every year, same setup. Dad in the center, Amber beside him, everybody arranged just so. "Rachel, go ahead and stand in the back row." I stepped behind the second row. Aunt Diane reached back and tugged my sleeve. "Come up front, honey. You're gonna get cut off." "Diane, you're blocking Amber's shoulder." Mom didn't even turn around. Aunt Diane let go of my sleeve and gave me a look, the kind that says I'm sorry and I see you all in one glance. Uncle Dave held up the phone to find the timer setting. The shutter clicked. I was at the very edge of the frame. Half in, half out. That was the last family photo I would ever be in. I didn't know it then. But looking back, the frame was already broken long before that camera clicked. Now here's where everything falls apart. And I need you to stay with me because this is the part that changes everything. Through dinner, while people drifted to the living room and the kids scattered to the basement, I was carrying plates back to the kitchen. That's when I heard Amber's voice rise above the crowd. She was on the couch, hand extended, showing off a ring. I stopped in the doorway. I knew that ring. Oval sapphire. Thin gold band. A small chip on the left prong where Grandma Ruth had caught it on a fence post in her garden years ago. She used to let me try it on when I was little. She told me, explicitly in front of my mother, that ring was mine when she was gone. "Mom gave it to me last week," Amber was saying. "Isn't it gorgeous?" "Where did you get that?" My voice came out flat. No anger. Just flat. Amber smiled the way she always does when she knows she has the room. "Mom gave it to me. She said Grandma would have wanted me to have it." I looked at Mom. Mom nodded. "Amber's here all the time. She deserved it." The room went quiet in that particular way, the way it does when something heavy drops and everyone pretends they didn't feel the thud. Aunt Margie studied her wine glass. Uncle Dave cleared his throat. In the corner, Kyle was watching. His jaw was tight. He looked like a man sitting on information he desperately wanted to hand over and couldn't. "Okay," I said. Just that one word. And I walked back to the kitchen with the plates. I stood at the sink with the water running and I thought about Grandma Ruth. About the hospital room. About the promise I made. And I thought about that sapphire ring on my sister's hand. 20 minutes later, I was by the fireplace talking to Aunt Diane about her garden, trying to feel like a normal person at a normal holiday dinner. Amber settled into the center of the couch and started in on the old stories. "Remember when Rachel cried at the 6th grade science fair because Dad had to work late? She made this whole display board and then fell apart in the gymnasium." Amber shook her head like it was the funniest thing. She always needed so much validation. I felt the heat climb up my neck. "That's not what happened," I said. Amber tilted her head. "See? Till so sensitive. Rachel, don't start something tonight." "Girls." Dad from the recliner. Eyes still on the TV. But his tone landed on me, it always does, because I'm the one who reacts and Amber is the one who provokes. She never has to stop because nobody ever tells her to begin. She kept going. Another story. Another version of our childhood where she was the easygoing one and I was the dramatic one. The room laughed nervously at the parts that were supposed to be funny. Most people looked at their drinks. And then Amber leaned forward, voice dipped sweet as molasses, and said, "I just want us to be a real family." Why is that so hard for some people? 28 people in that room. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them heard what it sounded like. The word family coming from a woman wearing my dead grandmother's ring in a house I had been paying for since before some of these people got married. Aunt Diane caught my eye. She mouthed two words, "Not here." I clenched my jaw and nodded. But Amber could feel it. The way she kept talking, faster, louder, that's what people do when they're trying to cover the sound of something they're afraid of. I just needed water. 2 minutes and a glass of water. I stood up. The only path to the kitchen cut between the coffee table and the back of the couch where Amber was holding court. I turned sideways. My shoulder brushed hers, the kind of contact that happens 100 times at any family gathering, the kind you don't even register. Amber registered it. She went still mid-sentence. The room noticed, the way a room always notices when the loudest person suddenly stops making noise. She turned her head slow. Her eyes locked onto mine. I could see it coming the way you sometimes see a car accident unfolding and your body refuses to believe it's real. The way her jaw set. The way her right hand lifted off the armrest. I saw all of it. And I still didn't move. Because my brain flat out refused to believe what was about to happen. Not here. Not in front of 28 people. Not over a shoulder brush. The slap landed open-palmed, full force across my left cheek. The sound was sharp. Not a thud. Crack. Like a hand hitting a tabletop. My head snapped to the right. My ear rang. I tasted something copper at the corner of my mouth. The room held its breath. I straightened up. I felt the heat spreading across my cheekbone, my left eye watering. Not crying, just the body's automatic reflex to impact. I blinked it clear and looked at Amber. Her chest was heaving. Her hand was still half raised, not to strike again, but because she hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Her eyes were wide, not with regret. With adrenaline. 28 people. Forks frozen midair. Conversations dead. Even the football game on the TV seemed to go quiet. Not one person spoke. The silence lasted long enough that I could hear the clock on the mantel. I could hear ice shifting in someone's glass across the room. I could hear my own heartbeat, thick and slow, pumping through something heavier than blood. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't step back. I didn't say a word. 'Cause whoever broke that silence first was going to tell me everything I needed to know about this family. Mom broke it. She crossed the room in 3 steps. And for one stupid, hopeful second, I thought she was coming to me. That she had watched her daughter get slapped and was going to do what mothers are supposed to do. She stopped in front of me. Looked me up and down. Her mouth was a thin line. "Apologize to your sister. Right now. Or get out." The words hit harder than the slap. They landed somewhere behind my sternum, in the place where you keep the last little piece of belief that your mother will choose you. "She hit me," I said. "You provoked her. You always do." I looked at Dad. He was already on his feet. He walked to the front door without a single word, opened it, and stood there holding the knob. The November air rushed in and knocked a napkin off the side table. He stared at the floor. Not at me. Not at Amber. At the floor. "Frank, for God's sake." Aunt Diane from the corner of the room, her voice shaking. Dad didn't look up. On the couch, Amber's lower lip trembled perfectly. Right on cue. "She bumped into me on purpose," she whispered, just loud enough for the room. "She's been picking at me all night." Mom turned back to me. "This is my house. Apologize." I looked at the open door. At my car in the driveway. At the road that would take me back to I-77 and north toward Charlotte and everything that was actually mine. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble. I walked to the chair by the window, picked up my coat, unhooked my keys from the wall rack, and walked toward the door the way I'd walk out of a meeting that had run way too long. Aunt Anne stood up. Dad cut her off with a look. No words, just a look, and she sat back down. Her hands were shaking. Her face was red. I passed Dad at the door. Clothes enough to smell the same aftershave he's worn since I was a little girl. He didn't look up. Not once. His knuckles were white on the doorknob. I stepped onto the porch. Cold hit my cheek, the same cheek Amber had hit. Stung differently. Cleaner somehow. The door closed behind me. I heard the deadbolt turn. Click. I walked to my car. The gravel in the driveway crunched under my boots. My car was at the end of the driveway near the road because I'd been the last one to arrive. I got in, put my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel and looked at the house. The windows glowed warm and yellow. I could see shapes moving behind the curtains. I sat there for maybe 4 minutes. Then I started the car. The house shrank in the rearview mirror. Then it disappeared behind the tree line at the curve in the road. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I just drove north and the white lines on the highway came one after another, and somewhere past the state line my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Aunt Diane, Rachel, honey. I am so sorry. That was wrong. All of it. Every bit of it. I read it at a red light outside of Rock Hill. I didn't answer yet. Not yet. I pulled into my apartment complex in Charlotte at 11:47 that night. Parking lot was quiet. The air smelled like dried leaves and car exhaust. I sat in the car with the engine off for a minute, staring at the door to my building. Then I remembered what Kyle said. Check your mail. I walked to the mailboxes at the building entrance. Pulled out 4 days' worth. A water bill, a credit card offer, a grocery store circular, and one envelope from the Pickens County Recorder's Office. Postmarked 6 days ago. I tore it open under the parking lot light. It was a certified copy of a deed transfer for my parents' property in Claiborne. Filed 5 weeks ago. The document showed that my name, Rachel Hartley, had been removed as co-signer. A new name had been added as co-owner. Amber Hartley. And at the bottom of the document 4 signatures. Frank Hartley, Carol Hartley, Amber Hartley, and a 4th one. Rachel Hartley. I stared at my name. My name in handwriting I did not recognize. The loops were wrong. The R was wrong. The H had a curl at the bottom that mine never does. Someone had signed my name on a legal document without my knowledge. Without my consent. Someone had forged my signature. I walked inside without taking my coat off. Sat at the kitchen table. Opened my laptop and scanned every page of that document, front, back, every margin. Then I emailed the whole package to Stephen Park with 1 line. They forged my signature. Call me tomorrow morning. I sat in the dark. The refrigerator hummed. Car passed outside. I didn't sleep. At 8:03 in the morning my phone rang. Steven. Rachel, this is fraud. We move on this Monday. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I was sitting across from Steven in his office in uptown Charlotte. He already had a file that was an inch thick. Your name was on the original deed as co-signer when the second mortgage was recorded 9 years ago, he said, reading from his notes without looking up. 5 weeks ago, a new deed was filed removing your name and adding Amber Hartley as co-owner. No notification to you. No signature from you, at least not a real one. He slid a photocopy across the desk. The forged Rachel Hartley stared up at me. Loopy. Rushed. Nothing like my handwriting. There's more. Steven set down his pen. After that deed transfer went through, someone opened a home equity line of credit against the property. A HELOC. $98,000. The application lists Amber as sole borrower. The bank approved it based on the equity in the property, equity that your 9 years of payments built. $98,000. Pulled from a house I'd been paying for, against equity I'd created. Where did the money go? My contact at the title company ran a preliminary trace. The bulk of it, around $73,000, went into a business account tied to Amber's studio. The rest paid down personal credit card debt in her name. I leaned back in my chair and watched the December morning traffic crawl down the street below Stephen's window. What are we dealing with here legally? He folded his hands on the desk. Forgery of a recorded instrument. Real estate fraud. Potentially identity-related charges if she used your personal information on the HELIC application. In this state, forging a recorded document is a felony. He let the words sit there for a second. Your sister committed a felony. I nodded slowly. What do we do? Before lunch, Stephen had drafted 3 cease and desist letters. One to Amber Hartley. One to Frank and Carol Hartley. One to the bank that approved the HELIC. The demands were clean and direct. Freeze the HELIC immediately, restore the original deed with my name, provide a full accounting of all funds withdrawn, and acknowledge that a criminal complaint would be filed if none of this was resolved within 18 days. 18 days, Stephen said. That's more than fair. While he printed the letters, I opened my banking app. 9 years of automatic transfers. $1,600 a month to my parents' joint account. The mortgage payment on the second lien. A quarterly deposit to Amber's studio account. I canceled them all. Every single one. 6 taps on a screen. 9 years gone in about 4 minutes. Stephen watched from across the desk. You sure? They forged my name and stole my equity. I'm not funding that. He nodded. Once we file with the county recorder, the deed gets flagged. A lease pendens goes on the property. It's a public notice that there's a legal dispute. Nobody can sell, nobody can refinance, nobody can pull another dime against it until this is resolved. Will my parents face charges? They signed the deed under their own names. If they claim Amber misled them, they'll need to prove that. Either way, someone is in serious trouble. I looked at the 3 envelopes on his desk. 3 relationships detonated. 12 pages of legal language. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm protecting myself. Stephen put the envelopes in a FedEx mailer. That is exactly what you're doing. The following Wednesday, my phone rang at 7:20 in the morning. Mom. I almost didn't answer. Then I picked up. Rachel, something's wrong. Her voice was tight. The automatic payment didn't come through this month. The bank sent a notice. That's not an error, Mom. I canceled it. Silence. Kind that has real weight to it. What do you mean you canceled it? I mean I stopped paying for a house I no longer legally own according to the deed Amber filed. What on earth are you talking about? Your attorney will explain it. You'll be hearing from mine. A pause. Then you ungrateful after everything this family has. Name one thing you've done for me, Mom. One thing. The silence stretched. I heard her breath catch. Then Dad took the phone. His voice was low and tired, the way it sounds when he's been drafted into something he'd rather avoid. Ratch. He used the nickname he hadn't called me in years. Cracked something loose in my chest for just a second. Don't do this to your mother. I didn't do anything, Dad. Check who did. I hung up. The phone buzzed 17 times over the next 2 hours. Amber, Mom, Dad, Amber again, Kyle once, Mom twice more, then Amber 4 times in a row. I didn't answer a single one. I made coffee. I ate toast. I sat at my kitchen table and watched the December sun move across my floor in a slow stripe. And for the first time in almost a decade, I didn't feel that house pressing down on my shoulders. The FedEx arrived at my parents' house on a Thursday. I know because Amber called me at 11:16 that morning, and the crying was different this time. Not the performance she puts on for a room full of people. This was the ugly kind. Wet and ragged and scared. You can't do this. I'm your sister. You forged my signature on a legal document, Amber. That's not a family matter. That's a crime. Mom and Dad said you wouldn't care. They said you had plenty and we needed it more. They said, then they can explain all of that to the court. Rachel, please. I'll put your name back. I'll close the HELOC. I swear, just don't file anything. You had 18 days to fix it. You spent $98,000 of my equity instead. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Something stripped of all the performance. Just a woman who had finally run out of runway. You're going to destroy this family, she whispered. I didn't destroy it, I said. I just stopped rebuilding it. I hung up, opened my laptop, and emailed Stephen 2 words, move forward. That Monday, Stephen filed the formal complaint with the Pickens County Recorder's Office. He walked in at 9 a.m. with the original deed showing my name, the fraudulent transfer with the forged signature, 9 years of bank statements from my account showing mortgage payments, and a notarized affidavit from me confirming I had never authorized any transfer. By noon, the county placed a lease pendens on the property. The house was frozen in the public record. Nobody could sell it, refinance it, or pull another credit line against it until the dispute was resolved. Stephen also sent formal notice to the bank that approved the HELOC. Federal lending regulations require lenders to verify the identity and consent of all parties on a deed before issuing secured credit. The bank had not done that. The bank's compliance office responded within 6 hours. The HELOC was suspended. Amber couldn't touch it. Stephen called me at 3. The county just froze it. Your sister cannot touch that property. Through the glass wall of my office, I could see my team running numbers on a bid for a new water treatment facility. The normal work. Real work. The kind where you build things instead of watching them get picked apart. What happens in 18 days if they don't comply? I asked. We go criminal. I thanked him and went back to my blueprints. Jordan stopped by my desk around 4 that afternoon. She set a coffee on my desk without being asked and sat in the chair across from me. You seem better, she said. Still something going on, though. I told her a version of it, not everything, but enough. She was quiet for a second. Then, you know what I keep thinking about? You probably kept that family going for so long that you started to believe that was just your job. Like it was written into your contract somewhere. She shook her head. Nobody should live their life like that. I didn't say anything. But I kept thinking about it on the drive home. On day 5 after the legal freeze, Amber's studio started to fall apart. She had been using the HELOC to cover operating expenses, rent, supplies, payroll for 2 employees. When the bank froze the line, the money stopped. No grace period. No warning. Just a debt account and a landlord expecting $12,000 by the end of the month. She couldn't pay. The landlord posted a 10-day notice on the studio door. Kyle texted me one night around 2 in the morning, a long message full of typos, the kind you send when you're too tired to be careful. He said Amber had been running the studio at a loss for over a year. He said she had told him the HELOC was covered and not a big deal. He said he had told her not to do the deed transfer, and she had threatened to tell my parents that he'd been unfaithful if he said anything. He hadn't been unfaithful. He'd just failed to fight hard enough. He ended the message with, I told her, you stole from the one person keeping us afloat. She threw a coffee mug at the wall. I read it twice. I felt no satisfaction. I felt the way you feel when a building you've been propping up with your own body finally stops. Not a crash, just a long, tired settling. The studio was shuttered by December 19th, 3 days before Christmas. On day 11, Dad called. I almost didn't recognize his voice. It was thinner than I remembered. Like the past 2 weeks had added 10 years. Ratch. This has gone too far. He hadn't called me Ratch since I was maybe 12 years old. Something small and sharp cracked in my chest when I heard it. Dad, she forged my name on a legal document. She made a mistake. People make mistakes. You held the door open for me. On Thanksgiving. You didn't say one word. Long silence. The furnace through the phone. Mom's TV in the background. Some game show. I didn't know what to say, he finally said. That's the problem. You never do. Another silence. Careful, like he was handling something fragile. What do you actually want from us, Rachel? I want the deed restored. I want the Helic closed. And I want Amber to face the legal consequences of what she did. That's not revenge, Dad. That's the law. She's your sister. She committed a felony against me. Being family doesn't change the law. His breath was unsteady. He sounded like a man who had spent 67 years avoiding hard conversations and had finally run out of exits. If you push this all the way, your mother may never get past it. I closed my eyes. I saw him at the door. Hand on the knob. Cold air. My cheek still burning. She hasn't gotten past the fact that I moved away at 22, I said. I think I'll survive. He hung up without saying goodbye. Deadline. Day 18. No response. No attorney contact. No deed restoration. No compliance. But nothing but silence and an Instagram post from Amber 3 days prior. Some people think they can use money to control the people who love them. Pray for anyone who mistakes transactions for relationships. I screenshotted it and sent it to Stephen. His reply, she's constructing a narrative. We file tomorrow. The next morning, Stephen submitted the criminal complaint to the district attorney's office. The charges, forgery of a recorded instrument, real estate fraud, both felonies. Complaint included the fraudulent deed, bank records showing unauthorized Helic withdrawals, my affidavit, and a written analysis from a certified forensic document examiner confirming the signature was not mine. The DA's office assigned a case number within 48 hours. I was sitting in my car outside my office when Stephen called. December sky. Bare trees. Heater running. It's filed, he said. The DA has it. I watched a woman walk into the building across the street carrying coffee and scrolling her phone, living a Tuesday like it was nothing. I envied her for about 3 seconds. I gave them 18 days, I said. She gave me a slap and a forged signature. Stephen didn't have anything to add to that. He didn't need to. January. The DA opened a formal investigation. Amber was summoned. She hired a defense attorney. Kyle filed for divorce. Papers were finalized in February. The studio was gone permanently. The landlord had changed the locks the week before Christmas. 2 employees lost their jobs. Amber's social media became her courtroom. Being betrayed by your own family during the holidays is something no one prepares you for. She never mentioned the forgery. She never mentioned the Helic. She never mentioned my name. But Aunt Diane did. Under one of Amber's posts, the one about how family should be about love, not lawyers, Aunt Diane wrote one sentence. Maybe tell the whole story, Amber. Amber deleted it in under 10 minutes. But screenshots travel. Within 2 days, Aunt Diane had texts from 4 relatives asking what she meant. She told them. Simply, cleanly, without drama. Kyle, through his own attorney, provided text messages between him and Amber discussing the deed transfer, the forged signature, and her timeline for drawing on the Helic before anyone noticed. He didn't do it for me. He did it because Amber had threatened to lie about him first, and he had decided the truth was less frightening than continuing to protect her. February. Mom called one last time. I was making pasta. Glass of wine open. The phone showed Mom and I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Her voice was different. Small. Nothing like the woman who pointed at me in that living room and told me to apologize. I didn't know about the signature, Rachel. I swear to you I didn't know she forged it. But you knew I was paying for the house. Silence. And you let Amber take credit for it. You told everyone it was her. 4 years. A long breath. I wanted to keep her close. She stayed. She was here. You weren't. I was here every time a bill came due, Mom. I was here for 9 years of direct deposits and co-signed documents. You just couldn't see me because I was 3.5 hours up the road and Amber was standing right in your kitchen. She cried. Not a performance. Just the sound of a woman who had run out of places to put all of it. I listened. I didn't comfort her. I didn't say it was okay because it wasn't. But I didn't pile on either. I hope you figure this all out, I said. I mean that. But I can't keep being the one who fixes things for everyone. Rachel, take care of yourself, Mom. I hung up. Pasta was slightly overcooked. I ate at the kitchen table by myself. The apartment was warm and quiet. Somewhere in Claiborne, my mother was sitting in a house she might lose, starting to understand that the daughter she'd been overlooking for 20 years was the one who had been keeping the lights on. And the daughter she'd kept closest was the one who set the fire. I washed my dish. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. March. Aunt Diane drove up to Charlotte for the weekend. She brought a casserole and news. Your father sits on the front porch every single morning now, she said, wrapping her hands around a mug of decaf at my kitchen table. Rain, cold, doesn't matter. He just sits there staring at the road. He's always been quiet. This is different, honey. I asked him what he was thinking about. She paused. He said I held the door open. I held it open and let her walk out. I set down my mug. Coffee rippled. Aunt Diane reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. He asked me to bring this to you. Wrote it by hand. Said it took him 3 days to get through it. My name was on the front. In his handwriting. Careful and blocky the way he writes everything. I opened it later after she left. 1 page. Blue ink on lined notebook paper. He wrote that he had always known I was the one holding everything up. That he'd never said it because he thought I didn't need to hear it, that I was strong enough to go without. He wrote that he had been wrong about that. He wrote that every person needs to hear it sometimes, no matter how strong they are. He wrote that on the night I walked out, he stood at that front door for 12 minutes after it closed, staring at the dark driveway, and he knew, right then in that moment, that he had made a mistake he couldn't fix with a sentence. At the bottom, you deserved better from your father. I don't know if it's too late to be that, but I know I should have been it all along. Inside the envelope, wrapped in a piece of tissue paper, was Grandma Ruth's sapphire ring. He had taken it back from Amber. I held it in my palm. It weighed almost nothing. It weighed everything. I put it in my nightstand drawer. I didn't write back. Not yet. Small towns don't keep secrets. When the lease pendants hit the public record in Pickens County, it became searchable, and in Claiborne, where everybody knows which truck belongs to which family, a legal flag on the Hartley property was big news without ever touching a newspaper. Aunt Diane told me the whispers started at church. Someone from the county recorder's office mentioned it to their neighbor, who mentioned it to the organist, who mentioned it to Mom's friend Linda. Is everything okay with your house, Carol? Linda asked after Sunday service. Mom picked up her purse and left without answering. Town started remembering things. They remembered that Rachel Hartley's name was on the contractor's check for the kitchen renovation. They remembered seeing her car in the driveway the weekend the new roof went on. They remembered Amber talking about the studio expansion while Rachel sat quietly at the end of the table at every gathering. We always figured somebody else was fronting all of that, one of the neighbors told Aunt Diane. Now we know. You can delete a comment on Instagram. You can't delete a county filing. Amber stopped posting. Mom stopped going to church. Dad kept sitting on the porch. And 3.5 hours away in Charlotte, I went to work every morning and came home to an apartment that was quiet and small and completely, entirely mine. April. Amber took the plea deal. The DA offered 2 years of probation with full restitution of the $98,000 drawn from the HELOC. She didn't have the money, of course. She'd burned through most of it. She'd be paying it back in installments for the next decade minimum. Her attorney argued financial hardship. The judge moved forward anyway. May. The deed was restored. My name went back on it, not because I wanted ownership, but because the fraud had to be fully reversed before anything else could move legally. Once it was clean, I sold my share of the property to my parents for $1. Stephen filed the paperwork on a Tuesday afternoon. "You sure about this?" he asked, pen over the paper. "I don't want the house," I said. "I want out of it. $1. Not because my share wasn't worth anything, it absolutely was. But because I was done paying for a seat at a table that had never really been set for me. That dollar was a period at the end of a very long sentence. My parents sold the back acre of property in the spring, a parcel my grandfather had cleared decades ago, for $55,000. Covered several months of mortgage payments. They wouldn't lose the house. But the cushion I had provided for nearly a decade was gone now. The life they'd been living on my labor had shrunk to fit the space they could actually afford on their own. I don't contact them directly. Everything still goes through Aunt Diane. I drive past the Claiborne exit on I-77 sometimes when I'm headed to project sites in central South Carolina. I don't take it. But I don't close my eyes when I pass it either. That's progress, I think. It's a Saturday night in late May. My apartment is quiet. The window unit hums. I open my nightstand drawer. Dad's letter folded neatly. The ring beside it still in the tissue paper. I take the ring out and hold it up toward the lamp. Deep blue, almost violet at the edges. The chip on the prong is still there. Grandma Ruth never got it repaired. She said the flaw was part of the story. I slide it onto my right hand. Fits perfectly, the way it always did when I was a little girl pretending to be grown. Grandma Ruth told me to hold this family together. I tried. For 17 years, I bent myself into the shape of that promise. I wrote checks. I swallowed insults. I drove down twice a month and stood at the edge of the photo and took the seat closest to the door and peeled the potatoes in a kitchen that was never really mine, even though I paid for every inch of it. But Grandma Ruth didn't raise me to disappear. She raised me to be a bridge, something that connects people, carries weight, holds things up. She just never told me that even bridges have weight limits. She said, hold them together. She didn't say, let them tear you apart. I think she would understand. I think if she were sitting across from me right now, smelling like lavender and that vanilla hand cream she kept on her nightstand, she would take my hand and say, "You did enough, Ratch. You always did more than enough." I look at the ring. I look at the letter. I look out the window at the street below, the streetlight warm and yellow, the sidewalk empty on the first real warm night of the year. And I smile. A real one. The first real one in this whole long story. The next Saturday, Aunt Diane drives up again. This time she brings Grandma Ruth's pot roast recipe, the one with the dark beer, the bay leaves, and a bottle of whatever red wine she can find, which this particular evening turns out to be something she grabbed from a gas station off the highway. "Don't look at the label," she says, setting it on my counter. It was either this or a neon green energy drink. We cook together. She stirs the pot while I chop the onions, and for a little while it's like being back in Grandma Ruth's kitchen in a time when none of this had happened yet. "Your father started seeing someone," Aunt Diane says, not looking up from the pot. "A therapist, I mean. First time in his life. Good for him. Your mom hasn't gone yet. She's not blaming you the way she was, but she's not ready to say what she needs to say either." "What is that?" "All of it." Aunt Diane shrugs. "She's stubborn. You know." "I know. Kyle's divorce went final last month." She glances at me. "I'm not saying that to twist the knife. Just keeping you in the loop." "I know. I don't feel glad about it. I don't feel sad. I feel the way you feel when a storm passes overnight and you step outside in the morning and everything is wet and wrecked and somehow lighter for it. Your dad misses you, Aunt Diane says finally. She looks at me straight. He won't say it, right? But he does. Missing me isn't the same thing as respecting me. No, she says. It's not. We sit at my kitchen table with the pot roast and the gas station wine and we eat. The windows are fogged from cooking. The apartment is warm in a way that feels earned. Aunt Diane doesn't give me advice. She doesn't tell me to forgive or to call or to let it go. She just sits across from me and eats, present and steady and quiet in a way that says more than talking ever could. You did the right thing, Ratch, she says at the door, pulling on her coat. The hard thing and the right thing. Both at once. I watch her walk to her car. The street is quiet. A neighbor's dog trots past on a leash. The May air smells like cut grass and somewhere nearby, someone is grilling for the first time this year. I go back inside. I sit at my kitchen table. I put both hands flat on the surface, and for the first time in a very long time there's nothing pressing down on them. So here I am, Rachel Hartley, 41 years old, Senior Director of Operations, one-bedroom apartment with a drafty bathroom window and a stove that takes 3 clicks to light. A ring on my right hand that finally made it to where it was supposed to go. I don't hate my family. I need you to hear that clearly. I don't hate them. My parents are afraid and flawed and human. My sister is selfish and desperate and smaller than she knows. My father is a decent man who never learned how to speak when it counted. My mother is a scared woman who confused proximity for loyalty. They're not monsters. They are just people who got very comfortable taking from someone who never once said no, until she did. I used to believe that loyalty meant never walking away. That keeping a promise meant keeping yourself small so the people around you could stay comfortable. Grandma Ruth asked me to hold this family together. And I thought that meant carrying all of it, the weight, the cost, the silence, the slap, every single bit of it. Now I know, loyalty to yourself is the first loyalty. Everything else comes after that. You can love people and still refuse to let them destroy you. You can forgive without returning to the scene of the crime. You can sell your share for $1 and walk away richer than you have ever been. I don't know yet if I'll talk to my parents again. Maybe at Christmas. Maybe next spring. I'm not slamming the door. But I'm not standing there holding it open for people who've already shown me what they do when they have the chance to walk through it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't fight. It isn't yell. It isn't prove anything to anyone. It's walk out the door, close it gently behind you, and build something that belongs entirely to you. Grandma Ruth would understand. I look at the ring on my finger. The sapphire catches the lamplight. The chip on the prong winks at me like a secret we're keeping between us. I smile. I mean it. That's my story. And if you're still here, thank you. That means more than I can say. Now I have one question for you. If you had been standing in that living room on Thanksgiving night, if that had been you, would you have walked out? Or would you have stayed and fought? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story made you think of someone who needs to hear it, someone who's been giving everything and getting nothing back, share it with them. Sometimes people just need to hear that they are allowed to stop. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.